So yeah, welcome everyone, young, old, and everyone in between, indeed. So thanks for joining us today. We've got a very short amount of time. We've only got 1 hour and a packed agenda. So what we're hoping to do, the intention is that we'll use through the presentations, we'll keep moving if everyone's happy with that. And we've set aside a good 15 minutes at the end for questions, but please also use the chat function as we go to put your questions. And I'm sure, Nigel, it'd be the case that we can capture any further questions that might not get answered and come back on that as well post-event.
Absolutely. We'll be happy to have a discussion in the chat, and we'll try and field questions and also afterwards with follow-ups.
Brilliant. Great. Thanks, Nigel. So yeah, I'm Tim Gale. I'm the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership Manager, and I'll be doing a short intro and a little bit of an introduction to the carbon baseline situation in the county. And a little bit of an introduction to the partnership, first of all, to kick us off today. But before we do that, Nigel, I think, has a little bit of a quiz question for us. So I'll hand you over to Nigel briefly for that.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And just by way of an icebreaker and just to test your knowledge of Cumbria and particularly trees, we've got just a short question here if anybody'd like to have a go at answering this. Sorry, Tim, there's a system error coming up on that for some reason. It was fine just now, but could you continue for the moment? I'll try and launch the poll if I can get that going. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I don't know what everyone else is seeing there, but it looks like it's working, Nigel, from my
okay, all right.
point. Well, I can see votes coming in. That's all. It looks like it's working.
Okay, good. Well, that's fine because it's looking rather blank on my screen. But
at least I hope that's what it means. Looks like we've got a favourite answer so far, certainly on my screen, of Borrowdale.
Well, if I can leave it with you, Tim, then to share the results. If you want to stop it in 10 seconds and just let people know the answer, that would be brilliant.
Okay, so I'll just give it a couple more seconds.
Thank you very much.
See if this works. There we go. So if I share results, let's see if that happens. Certainly what I'm seeing, I hope everyone else is, the answer to that question of do we know our Cumbrian trees? Do we know where the ancient yew trees, 1,500 years old, where they are? Borrowdale is the favourite answer. 64% of you have gone for Borrowdale. I'm getting the thumbs up from Nigel, so that means that's the correct answer. So well done. 2/3 of us know where the oldest yew trees are. I didn't, I have to say, and not until Nigel told me anyway. So yeah, there we go. I've learned something already today. Thanks, Nigel. So has that disappeared from the screen? Okay, Nigel, that we can move on.
It has for me, thank you. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, hopefully my slides are still sharing and still working. It looks like it is from my perspective. So I'll crack on with a quick intro, as I say, into the baseline situation in Cumbria, carbon baseline, and a little introduction into the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership. The slides moving on. They're not for me, Nigel.
Not so far, Tim.
Okay, I'll just see if we can. My screen's frozen, unfortunately.
Oh. Would you like me to? There we go. No, let's advance now one slide, Tim.
Great. I think that's probably just my system creaking, so apologies for that. So yeah, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the emissions context. We've just launched the partnerships website. That's at the bottom of the screen there. Feel free to explore and find out a bit more about the partnership for yourselves. The partnership is made up of more than 80 organisations now. We have a strategic oversight board overseeing the work of the partnership. Our ambition is to be net zero in the county by 2037, hugely ambitious target. We're looking to coordinate climate action. The main purpose of the partnership is to do exactly that, to try and coordinate all of the multitude of projects and fantastic works going on from community level right through to big organisations. So to try and gather that, quantify it and understand what that means for our pathway to net zero by 2037. And we've broken that task up at the moment into 4 sector groups. And at the moment, they're looking at transport, mobility, waste, housing, and probably most important for today, the work that the farming and land use group has done. So that's how we're trying to sort of partition that up into understandable or reasonably understandable areas of that massive carbon footprint. We know that Cumbria has a huge diversity of landscapes, and I know the series of events, including this one that Nigel's put together, I'm sure will explore that variation across the county, everything from the northern Pennines in the northeast there, Solway Coast, the northern fells of the Cumbria Lake District, the southern valleys and into the Yorkshire Dales area, the limestone uplands there into the southeast of the county there. So that massive variation of landscapes presents obviously huge challenges in terms of the future of farming, how we manage the landscape, the element of that relates to tourism and the tourist economy. Huge challenges, but also a lot of opportunities as well, particularly around carbon reduction that we're focused on today. And on that subject, we have a carbon baseline report published back in 2020. I should say that we're working on I'm not, but Small World Consulting are working on a review of that at the moment, taking account of changes recently from the government's 6th carbon budget and a number of other changes to how land use emissions are calculated, particularly from upland peat areas. So that update we're expecting in the next month or so. But for now, this information gives us a good idea there. I think that area that I've circled around 2035, a point where the LULUCF, the land use and land use change and forestry, the sequestration element of the emissions, will have to match the amount of emissions emitted if we're to be on that 2037 pathway. So you can see the role of land use and land use change and forestry there in getting Cumbria to that target. As I say, those varied landscapes present a real asset and opportunity for sequestration and carbon storage for the county, and certainly absolutely essential to getting us to anywhere near that ambitious target of 2037. So we know that the landscape will be important. It's an asset for Cumbria. The meeting that ambition won't be possible without significant change in how we manage the landscapes. That target will almost certainly be missed. We know that about 10% nationally of emissions come from the agriculture sector. It's not dissimilar to the number for Cumbria as well. That again is being worked up by Small World Consulting to better understand those emissions. It's bigger, the emissions are bigger if we start to take account of the off-farm emissions, the wider consumption-based footprint of food, for example. Trying to understand that is hugely complex. So Small World Consulting are helping us to better understand that from a Cumbrian perspective. Really important that we get the Cumbrian numbers, because they're not always the same as the national numbers. So understanding that from a Cumbria perspective is really important. National Farmers Union, and we'll hear from Adam later on, has set out really ambitious sector target for agriculture of net zero by 2040. So that's giving us a sort of place where we can understand what it is that the industry will have to do to tackle emissions from agriculture. I think it's important as well that Cumbria plays to its strengths around this and understands what the agricultural situation, the emissions from the agriculture sector in Cumbria is more accurately. And as I say, Small World Consulting are helping us do that. It'll be really important as well that I think soils is something that we can agree on across all sectors, that it's really important, whether that's from a nature recovery perspective, future of farming perspective, or indeed things like flood risk management. I think it has, if we're able to store more carbon in more carefully and sympathetically manage soils, then we will improve all of those co-benefits, all of those different factors around landscape management, including looking after our farmers and our land and the future of farming. It's important as well, I think, to say through the farming lens that it's a really interesting time, challenging time for farmers at the moment, both in terms of questions around the government's policy direction around agriculture, and farm payments, huge challenges around workforce and skills, and of course something that we're all acutely aware of, the cost of energy and inputs into farms such as fertilizer. So we do understand that it's a very, very challenging time for the farming community. So this work needs to mesh into that thinking and support our farming community at the same time as trying to manage the carbon emission pathway downwards. I think it's also important to say that those soils, thinking about how we manage that, the likely number we will require, as I say, this is still work in progress, but it's at least somewhere between a 5 to 8-fold increase in the amount of carbon stored in our soils at the moment. So it presents a huge challenge. I think from that we can identify some priority areas though that we can work on, and the great work that the sector group for the partnership has been looking at some of these priority areas for land use. I think today obviously we're focused on the top two there around trees and what we can do around increasing tree cover in the county, but also that restoration of our peatland agroforestry, looking at hedgerows, which I know is a subject of one of the future sessions, Nigel, isn't it, into the new year, as well as grasslands and introducing crops. So that we think there are a clear sort of 8 or maybe 9 areas that we could focus on as priority areas for reducing carbon emissions from our land. So I'm going to leave that there, Nigel, by way of an introduction to the work of the partnership and the baseline situation. I'll try and stop sharing my screen if it behaves itself. That's a useful introduction. And I'm going to hand over now to Neville Elstone, going to give us a perspective on a sustainable vision for Cumbria's woodlands. Over to you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's lovely to see some old friends and some new friends on the screen. So, hello. This is going to be a bit of a kind of unplugged session, so we'll see how it goes. I've got 3 things I want to talk about in essence, right? So I want to talk very briefly about Cumbria woodlands. I want to try not to answer my phone. I'm just going to switch it off. I wonder, there's 2 members of my team here, right, on the call. I bet they phoned up now just to stitch me up. So I want to talk a little bit about Cumbria woodlands. Keep that brief. I want to talk a little bit about trees, and I want to talk a little bit, lastly, about what's making me smile or frown at the moment. Okay, so not too many slides, 2 in fact. So Cumbria Woodlands, we're a not-for-profit organisation. We've been around for over 30 years now. We try and do what the private sector doesn't and what the government doesn't, and find a niche in between the two. Often that's around advice, information provision, training, guidance, that kind of stuff. And I will be talking a little bit more about that in the future. There's 15 of us at the moment. I think there's 3 of us on the call today. What that note means, don't know. Okay, so that's Cumbria Woodlands. What did I want to say about trees? Well, I suppose, right, if I think back to when I was a little baby forester, and then when I worked in the Forest Baby Incubator at Newton Rig, all these foresters for ages have been going, trees are brilliant. Look what we can do for society. We can do flood, we can do air quality, we can do water quality, we can do shade for stock. We can do a whole raft of stuff that we're currently not paid for, as well as timber, biodiversity, right? The brilliant thing for us is now that loads of people have realised this, and government have realised this, and government have national supporting policies that go with this, and they have policy interventions that are making this stuff happen or potentially happen. So if we look at woodland creation, the incentives are now greater than they have been in the last 30 years by some significant measure, really. So there is real potential out there. The government has massive aspiration around woodland creation. think the target nationally across the UK is 30,000 hectares. So that's an incredibly different place to where we were 10 years ago or more. We have a very robust regulatory process in place. And there's arguments about that regulatory process. We have the UK Forestry Standard, which underpins our interventions. And all the interventions are measured against that and have to be above that regulatory baseline. And indeed, if you want to get the grants, then often you will have to go over and above that. I wanted to talk about trees and carbon briefly. You know, we could do 3 hours on that really easily. So we have a robust standard for trees and carbon and woodland creation. That's been around for, I don't know, I guess around about a decade or more now. So there's been numerous iterations of it and refinements of that. And any woodland creation projects that want to sequester carbon and claim or get payment for that have to be registered against this carbon code. So it's a robust process that's attached to that. That's really good. What I would say, though, is the process is quite naive. And it's quite conservative, rightfully so, right? So the price of carbon has been very low, which means that the kind of process that you can attach to that in terms of measuring the carbon has to be quite small and therefore has to be quite conservative. As the price of carbon increases, we can afford to have a more complex process that then will more accurately measure what carbon we are sequestering, or indeed we are emitting. And you know, one of the major things around the forestry carbon code at the moment is there's no full life cycle analysis within it. Now, what that does is that underplays the roles of underplays particularly the role of faster growing species, because you know the dream ticket is you grow something, you cut it down, you put it in a building, and on the same piece of land you grow some more timber. Not only are you sequestering more carbon by doing that, but you're also locking it away in a building for, you know, as long as it lasts. So I then wanted to move on to my presentation. I think I'll just go through my, yeah. So I've talked about who we are and about trees and woodlands briefly. I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me a second. Here we go. Can you all see a smiley face and a sad face? Yep, great. Thanks, Tim. So I've done these to scale really, and I'll go through the frowny face things first. So what's making me frown at the moment in the world of trees? So ash dieback absolutely has to make me frown at the moment. Approximately 10% of the woodlands of Cumbria are ash. We will lose the bulk of those woodlands over time, and if we don't look after it, the chances of regeneration and restock there, especially with the deer numbers we have at the moment, mean that we will be losing carbon from those woodlands. Added to that, we have Phytophthora ramorum, sorry, there's not a simple name, on larch, and another Phytophthora on juniper. We have some of the most important juniper woodlands in the whole of the UK here in Cumbria, some of the biggest. So that really makes me frown. One of the other areas that I really frown about is trees outside woodlands. So not trees in woodlands, but trees outside woodlands in the broader landscape. And if you just look around, you look at the damage after Arwen, you look at losses in that area, and you look at the health of those trees, it makes me frown. But we haven't got numbers around that stuff. And I think we need to increase our numbers on that and our understanding around that. One of the other things that really makes me worry is the binary split. So we have rewilding over here, which is absolutely brilliant and absolutely has its place. And then we have hardcore industrial forestry over here. And my worry at the moment with land use policy and land use policy interventions is that we push people to these binary extremes. And actually, I really think we need to play much more in that middle space. And I'm absolutely certain we're going to hear that same message coming across from Adam as well. So there is space for all of that stuff, but we need to ensure that the current land use policy stuff coming out of DEFRA at the moment doesn't push us to those margins. I guess the other thing that really makes me frown is planting numbers. It's hard. It's hard for a whole raft of reasons. The regulatory process has to be robust, but it is hard for an individual to get through. And the uncertainty within the agricultural sector makes people really reluctant at the moment to change, and I completely understand that. And if I look at the national policy, the grants that are going to be coming along, so in ELMS, my feeling is that we won't be getting payment for ecosystem services in the way that many of us would want. So what's the value of that good to society? You know, flooding's the obvious one for Cumbria. How can we recompense that owner? I understand why it's not happening. It's hard to do, hard to make payments on that basis, but I don't think that's going to happen well and adequately enough within quite some time. So I'm going to move on to the smiley face. It is in scale, so I am smiling about stuff much more than I have done in the world of forestry, and excited. You know, we've grown as an organisation, therefore our footprint grows, and therefore our outcomes grow, and that has to be a positive thing, and that's a reflection of the value that society and government put on trees and woodlands.
Neville, so, can I give you a 1 minute warning? Sorry, interrupting you.
No, 1 minute.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, so, Neville.
People are waking up, incentives are waking up, generous incentives available. Cumbria Woodlands has a range of things where we can help people. We can help people with training, we give free advice, we give farm advice. We are hosting the Coastal Community Woodland, where we can give people both capital money and revenue support to do that. And several people from my team are on this call today. So my next slide just gives my contact details. He says, not wanting to advance, but please either drop us a line in the chat or send us an email. There we go, to neville@cumbriawoodlands.co.uk. That's me done.
Thanks very much, Neville, and sorry to rush you along. We got so much to fit into the hour. So we'll move very quickly to Adam Briggs from National Farmers Union to give us an agricultural perspective.
Right, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen if I can get it to work. There we are. Share. Oh God, you got a sneak preview. Sorry about that. 6 seconds. Oh dear. So can you now just see a set that says Cumbria Solutions for Landscape Trees? That's spot on. Okay, yeah. Right. I'll crack on because time's running. Yeah. So just first of all, thanks so much for inviting me here to speak today. Just so you know who's speaking there, my name is Adam Briggs. I'm the Environment Advisor for the National Farmers Union. I've worked for the NFU for 19 years now. I've done various different roles, but my current role is just looking after everything that relates to the environment. That's water quality, air quality, current and future support, climate change, and habitat restoration, tree planting falls within my remit. So my role really is just to give a bit of a perspective in relation to where I think farmers are with respect to the whole tree plant agenda. So what I thought I'd do was just give a little bit of context around where the industry is at this moment in time, then talk with some of the challenges faced around tree planting that farmers face that have been raised with myself. Then I'll talk about the NFU's tree strategy, and then finally just highlight some of the opportunities as I actually see them to try and end on a bit of a positive. So first and foremost, it's already been mentioned that agriculture is probably in one of the biggest times of flux I've ever actually known. The first thing to say is particularly pertinent to a lot of farmers in Cumbria is that we're seeing what's the second year of transition away from support delivered under the old scheme under CAP rules to support delivered under the new domestic agricultural policy. What that's meaning is that BPS, which underpins a lot of the profitability of Cumbrian agricultural businesses, will reduce by at least 20% this year, and by 2024 it'll be half. Now, if that's essentially your profit, that's a huge challenge for you, notwithstanding the impact of things like commodity prices now, input prices, energy prices, and also labour availability on farm. So there's a little bit of a mix of reducing incomes, increased input prices, plus a lot of uncertainty about where things are, which is, which you have to consider when you're speaking to farmers at this moment in time. So just to talk a little bit about what the challenges are when I go to speak to farmers, to do with agricultural support or anything really, what are some of the challenges around encouraging them to plant more trees? The first one obviously is uncertainty. We're moving away from the old scheme to the new scheme as well. Everything seems to be fixed around this year of 2024. That's when everything kind of flips over. That's where we're expecting more information on things like biodiversity net gain, around things like carbon markets, those sorts of things. So certainly at this moment in time, what I'm finding is that farmers are reluctant to do anything on their land that will tie them up for the long term. So what they're trying to do is just basically tread in water to see how things develop. And that obviously impacts on freeing up land to plant trees. The other one you come across quite a bit is if you're a tenant farmer. Obviously, if the landlord wants to plant it with trees, then essentially it means you can no longer farm it. So tenants are very, very nervous, not only about this tree plant agenda, but the whole environmental green finance agenda, because potentially they could see land being less available to them and put into, biodiversity net gain, habitat restoration, tree planting, whatever. Essentially, it could mean that they no longer have a farm to farm. Another issue, particularly around whole-scale, large-scale tree planting, is the permanence of it. So it's not something you can do for a couple of years, not just plant a crop of cereals and it can go back to grass. If you plant trees, essentially you've made a commitment for the long term to take that land out of production. That is a big decision for farmers, so that is something that they get very concerned about. They're very fixated at this moment in time on food security. Anywhere across the whole of the Northwest, when I talk about alternative land use, they always come back to food security. They see food prices going up. They've seen what's happened in the Ukraine. They've looked at what's happened to energy prices on the back of the fact that we're relied on energy imports. And the prevailing view seems to be, should we not be focusing on maintaining our food production capacity rather than potentially using the land for other uses? That needs to be the focus. You can't discount the fact that this is a step in the unknown for many farmers. I've come across situations where farmers have planted a lot of trees, and because I haven't looked after them, they've all died. So they're used to looking after cows, they're used to looking after sheep, potentially they're used to looking after trees. So there is potentially a skills gap there as well. There are tax implications as well with changing land use, so potentially losing some of the tax benefits associated with having productive agricultural land. And the other one that's just started to come up probably recently is other nature barriers. What I've found with a couple of tree planting schemes that I've spoken to farmers about, it's not the agricultural aspect which has held things back. It's the fact that potentially that land's it's too near a bird habitat, so they don't want your trees near certain types of birds. So it's not just necessarily agricultural production which acts as a barrier. It can be other aspects of, say, the land is suitable for other sorts of nature recovery, that sort of stuff. So really, I think it's that uncertainty and that permanence are the two key ones there, which are probably the biggest challenge at this moment in time. Now, on the back of that, in July 2021, the NFU produced their tree strategy, which obviously trees can be quite controversial with farmers for the reasons I've mentioned. So we produced our strategy, which was focused not only at farmers, but also policymakers to see, this is what we think could be done to try and encourage more farmers to plant trees on their farm. The first thing is, obviously, it goes through everything we talk about, is right tree, right place. You don't want to plant trees where it's not going to be conducive with farm and it's going to cause environmental damage. So you need to select the right areas. The other thing I always focus on is that most farmers already do have woodland on the farm, but essentially just kind of sits out with it. It's unmanaged. So why don't we look at bringing that back into management and reaping the benefits of what's already there? And then that potentially can be a stepping stone into freeing up other land there for woodland creation on a farm. Key that it needs to be voluntary. It can't be some sort of requirement for every farm to plant 10, 15, 20 hectares of land. It needs to be a voluntary arrangement because that'll make it easier to engage with the farmers. Address some of the barriers in tenancy agreements. That's not in relation to what I said before around tenant land and the landlord, the tenant being scared. It's in some tenancies there are requirements that the land can't be forested. It needs to remain in agriculture. So essentially that's a big barrier there. There needs to be proper compensation for farmers in relation to the loss of the capital value of the land. And something Neville's touched on as well is increased recognitions and incentive for trees out of woodland. As he said before, it's very much seen as an either or. It's either lots of trees or it's productive agricultural land. But there's loads of stuff you can do in between on the periphery in a productive landscape. And for me, I think that's where the initial focus needs to be, because once you've built up those opportunities, you've built a level of trust, then you'll open up the other opportunities that farmers have once they trust you and they know you're on their side. And then finally, already mentioned the ELMS scheme, would like to see specific tree measures within the ELMS scheme. So moving on to the opportunities and solutions. As I said before, lots has already been covered within the NFU tree strategy, but yeah, very much right tree, right place. Again, trees within productive landscape. I've never really understood why agroforestry hasn't actually been more taken up by farmers. So you've got land which essentially can produce food and also have trees within it. It serves both uses. So I don't understand why, why they don't see more of that. So for me, that probably is the first step into getting farmers more engaged in this sort of area, and then also making more of what's already there. The other thing really is figures like 30,000 hectares can be quite scary for farmers. So talk about tree numbers on farms would like to plant a certain number of trees rather than like to plant 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 hectares, because you could probably, I think you could probably find room for lots of trees on every farm. It's just when you talk about 3, 4, 5 hectares, that's when they get scared. When you talk about a couple of thousand trees on their farm, oh yeah, we can put them there, there, and there. So there's opportunities on every farm. I think there's an opportunity to definitely upskill farmers, so it's less of a risk for them. So they have the skills to be able to look after the trees as well. I do think there's room for bespoke schemes, such as what Cumbria Woodlands are doing. I'm working with City of Trees in Greater Manchester, and they have a bespoke scheme, and we've done meetings with them where just getting them in front of farmers, and it's a full range of different options from very, very small scale to large scale. The support is there, the money's there, and essentially they design the scheme with their farmers. So sitting down with a farmer to design a scheme that fits their needs, I think will open up opportunities for you as well. And I've already mentioned the ELMS scheme, the much maligned ELMS scheme, lack of clarity. There'll be 3 components within that. Sustainable farming incentive, which has just been launched. The local nature recovery change is going to be the countryside stewardship plus scheme, and also the landscape recovery scheme. And you'll see tree plant initiatives within each of those. And if you look at what they're talking about in terms of ELMS, so a hedgerow standard coming in next year, an agroforestry standard coming the year after, and then payments for looking after on-farm woodlands in the year after that. So I'd like potentially, in an ideal world, more of them to be available sooner rather than later, to try and open up these opportunities. And just talk about trees within the productive landscape. I mean, if I was to leave with 2 points, what I would say is focus on the win-wins. There's things you can do with trees that not only deliver for tree planting and for the climate, but also deliver for production. Neville's already mentioned shade for stock, which is a good one. The one I always quote is that if you put trees on a free-range hen unit, you'll end up with happier hens, more eggs, more productive flocks. So why wouldn't you want to do it? And then potentially you can plant trees to address water quality issues as well. So focus on the win-wins and really move away and get farmers thinking that it's not an either-or debate. It's not either trees or agriculture. It's basically, it can be everything in between, and focus on trees within a productive landscape. And I think if you do those 2 things, then I think you'll open up a lot of doors. And once you've got that level of trust, you've opened up that door, I think then you'll see other opportunities come in on the back of that. And I'm going to have a drink because I haven't stopped. My mouth's gone a bit dry. So
thank you, Adam. That's brilliant. That's a huge amount of information, a very complex area to capture in less than 10 minutes. So thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, how do I share my screen?
I think there's a
stop
yeah,
share.
red button, isn't it?
No.
That's the one. Well done. That's great. Thank you. Thanks very much, Adam. And we're going to move on quickly again, if we can, now to Ian Bell from Hallbankgate Farm, case study on part of the Fell Forward project. So over to you, Ian.
Hello, everybody. This isn't my thing, so I apologise for being bad at it. We are on the North Pennines. We rent off the RSPB. We have 7,000 acres altogether. We have 150 cows, 1,000 sheep. We are fattening, finishing our fat cattle and finishing all the lambs. We own 320 acres of them 7,000. The rest's rented off the RSPB. In the last 22 years, we've planted 30 acres of woodland on our own farm. When we bought the farm, there was 1 pond, and now there's 11. We've built them all. Generally, the woodland's the worst areas of the farm. So you can split the farm up. So you can put bulls either side of the woodland, so that none of the woodlands are huge width. They're just they're more of a function, really. Using wet land, using unproductive land, boggy bits, a lot of willows, as well as I've always been interested in wildlife, so it's created all sorts. The ponds have a little bit of a fetish of mine. I've built 10 on this farm. On the RSPB farm, I've probably built another 40, I would think. Scrapes and various things. Like we're farming, I think, I can only agree with the two men that's already been talking. I think the whole thing at the moment, it's like rewilding and no farming, where actually, if you come here, you can see both. We literally have everything. We farm, I think, properly. The farm's well stocked. There's a lot of grassland. It looks like grassland, but over the fence, there's another field that doesn't look like grassland, and then you get all the pipits and everything. So, like, I think if anybody needed to come and have a look at a farm that's rewilded without actually being called rewilded, I think we're there. You know, like we've with the FIPL grant, we've built banks for sand martins, dug several ponds, and like the instant benefit to the wildlife and the biodiversity on the farm is absolutely incredible. You know, like suddenly you get 60 sand martins coming and feeding on in a dry summer, feeding on a pond that you've built. You know, it's just incredible. So, and the other thing that we're growing our own crops. So I think maybe that's something that the farming community could maybe think about, given the prices and the Ukraine and everything. We're starting to grow our own and try and feed what the farm can do, which was maybe like it was in the 50s before fertilizer came along. We're actually farming organically on the whole farm now. And we grew 10 acres of oats and 20 acres of barley this year, just using shed muck pretty much. So yeah, that's another. With the FIPL grant, we've put in 3 miles of hedging in the last 3 years. It wasn't just FIPL, it was an AONB grant as well, mostly for shelter of livestock. Obviously, the wildlife corridors is a huge thing because we've got all these little bits of woodland and connecting it all up so everything can move about safely or not safely. And then biosecurity is a huge thing for us because we're a high health herd, Chevrolets, pedigree Chevrolets and commercial stocks all in a high health herds. So we need like that 6-7 foot boundary just to keep things healthy. And now I've lost where I am. Some of the woodland that I planted 22 years ago, it was supposed to be thinned after 15 years, but instead of thinning it, we actually laid quite a lot of it. So not all of that grew, but some did. So suddenly you've got this massive, diverse woodland that's got this bottom growing in it as well. So I think some of the birds that survived because of planting this woodland 22 years ago, the highlight this way was a nightjar. And I think that was actually due to laying the woodland. So it's like creating these little warm pockets for it to sit as they do. And then we've got all the probably usual things, but things that were never here, like long-tailed tits, pied flycatcher this year, which was like pretty rare for here, spotted flycatchers, every finch you can think of, wood warblers, chiffchaffs, willow warblers, red starts, and like they're just like they're sort of slightly fancier types. So you walk through that woodland now, it's just absolutely incredible what's there. And it doesn't actually, all it does on a farming point of view is benefits the farm, because you can have a bull either side of it without having to worry that they're ever going to get together. You know, winter time, you've got the shelter. So yeah, there's huge benefits. But I think the other thing that maybe nobody mentioned there, a lot of the things I just totally agree with you, and so there's no point saying them again, but I think a woodland edge is a massive thing. When you talk about species, you get into a huge block of woodland and that bit in the middle has nothing in pretty much. Where actually, if you've got longer, thinner bits that are just splitting fields up, you end up with like a lot of things using it. On the ponds that we built over the years, not that you're having a pond, but I'm just bragging a little bit. We've got kingfisher turned up this year for the first time ever on this farm. We have a little grebe lives on one of the ponds. And we had water rails this year for the first time. And then we had a green shank, which is fairly rare for around here. Plus all the waders and everything. So yeah, it's and all of them bits of ponds aren't really like some productive land. It is literally a wet corner that was always wet, and we just like scrape it out and use it. So yeah, I think one of the main things that I would say to everybody on this really is like the middle ground, like's already been said. I think like when the world population's going up so much, and there's like this huge urge for rewilding, I think actually on a North Pennine farm that goes up to 2,037 feet and down to 600 feet, I think the diversity that we have here and how we manage it and have run it for the last 30 years, I think a lot of people could come and look at it and just say, well, that is rewilded and that is also in production. You know, we produce a lot of food. We have like 150 cows and we're finishing all the cattle, 1,000 sheep, you know, 1,500 lambs. You know, it was still producing it, but at the same time, it's probably one of the most diverse. I mean, we had, I wrote this down somewhere. We had Cumbria Biodiversity Centre came with 10 recorders and had 67 varieties of moth in that woodland, that a 10-acre woodland that we planted a few years ago. It has a pond in, which I dug because the osprey was in the area, and the osprey also comes and uses it. It's win-win. So yeah, there were 67 varieties of night moth and 15 varieties of day moth, and they were there because we planted that wood 22 years ago, no other reason. And I think we're not far off having it how it should be.
That's great to hear, Ian. Thank you so much. I think it's really inspiring to hear that this can be done. And I think we'd welcome the opportunity. I'm sure anyone that wanted to visit the farm as a fantastic case study. And thank you to Ro for posting the link for more information to what Ian's working on at his farm there. So thank you very much for joining us, Ian. Appreciate that. We're going to move on quickly now, conscious we're running short of time. So we're going to get a local authority perspective now from Emmanuel from Copeland Borough Council.
Hi, yeah, I'm Emmanuel Flecken. I'm Open Spaces Manager for Copeland Borough Council. I hope you can see my screen. Does that come up?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Emmanuel.
Right. Excellent. Good. So, yes, I've been originally come from the Netherlands. So I've studied horticulture and arboriculture in the Netherlands, and then came over to the UK. And I've been working all over the UK at different local government sites, like county councils and district councils, looking after open spaces, trees and woodlands, and also worked in the private side. So I've been a little bit around on all those things. At Copeland, what we're trying to do is to improve. Let's hold on. My screen is not working. Right. So one of the the things what the local authority try to do for people is to provide quality open spaces, and they include like sports facilities, parks, and linear green spaces, country parks, and unfortunately we're like a district council, but county councils also have road verges to look after as well. And so all those areas are there for providing health and recreation benefits for people who are living nearby, and also for people who work there. So open spaces have a really ecological value, and we're trying to have a good infrastructure in place, what makes it possible for people to find all those green spaces and link them all up. And there's a very important landscape features, and we're trying to, some of them are landscape features, historical ones, we try to keep in place. Like my previous speaker was saying, like in the farming industry, it's quite important to have those parts of the landscape there. So especially when we're talking about everybody want to plant trees everywhere, that's fantastic, but it has to be not only just the right place, the right tree, it has to be in the right place as well. So as a landowner, we have a responsibility to look after the trees, and to make sure that there's an inspection regime in place, just to stop for our own liabilities. So when people come and visit our land, they feel reasonably safe, and they should be able to walk around without getting hurt. It is increasingly more difficult with the local government, because the budgets there are not really in place to do this properly. And with the increasing pressures, like Neville already mentioned earlier, like the ash dieback, it's putting increasing pressures on the budgets actually to maintain those sites and keep people safe. And also the climate change impact is quite big. Like the last big storm we've had, there's like an extra amount of trees that get damaged, and whereas the local authority then have to take care to make those places safe. Other challenges we have, obviously, is, as I said before, the budgets are quite restrained, and one of the first things that happen with local government is that the green spaces get forgotten, and there's no funding available. And woodlands is one of the first ones that normally drop off. They just get left alone. Nobody's actually have any time to look into them, and it could be a good thing. But for safety reasons, obviously, we're sometimes a bit worried about it, and we could end up with having lovely woodlands with signs saying "Welcome" and "Enjoy the space," but you actually can't walk into them because the trees are all laying all over each other, and the paths are not accessible anymore. Great for the wildlife, but maybe not so great for the people who come and visit it. So another part of the local government is what we have to do is to make sure that we keep landscape values and historical values in place. The way to do that is to have conservation areas, and we can have TPOs. We can apply on trees. When it comes to like a place like this, the picture here, you get this fantastic big yew tree. It's around 4,000 years old. It's in a place called Tendridge. Luckily, it was in a churchyard, so it has a little bit more protection. People won't necessarily do things about it, but it's sitting into the conservation area, and we're making sure that that people don't do any damage to them. One of the other things as a local government, we have to make sure that looking after the well-being of our residents, and we will try to get them involved as much as we can in our landscape. So we promote that they want to look after their local parks, and some people get involved then with doing tree planting or creating wildflower meadows, and on this occasion we have some tree planting going on in a local park. So Cumbria Community Woodland. So Cumbria is quite a low density of woodland in our area. So we signed up with the community forest to actually create some additional woodland areas in the Copeland area. Obviously, that's not straightforward because we're as a local authority have other commitments as well. So we've been looking for areas for this designated where actually can plant trees. We've found a couple of locations at the moment. We've got one application in, but hopefully is going forward where we're going to plant up this year. But in the longer term, we'll also be looking at other places to plant more trees. The biggest challenge we have in the local authority is obviously the budget is a big problem, but also there's quite a constraint on getting skilled people into the sector to actually provide to look after trees. There's not many of those around, and yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. That's hugely interesting, and I think it just to get us thinking about some of those statutory functions that you have to look after as local authorities, I think is eye-opening as well. So thank you very much for that presentation, Emmanuel. We're going to move on very quickly now to Jodie, our final speaker from West Cumbria Rivers Trust. I'm so sorry it's been so rushed today. We won't have that much time for questions, but over to you, Jodie, and we'll try and pick up as many questions as we can at the end and outside of the meeting as well. Thanks, Jodie.
Okay, hi, thanks everybody. Can you see my slides there?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Jodie. If you want to put it into slideshow mode, possibly, but we can see the slides. Thank you.
Oh, now you're talking. Right, there we go. Slideshow. Is that working now?
It's still in the slide view, but you can continue like that if you want. It's fine. We can see it. Thank you.
I shall do that. I can't get the thing to go down from the top of my screen there. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about Walkmill Community Woodland. So for those of you who might not have heard of it, which not many people actually have, it's a well kept secret. It is just over near Whitehaven, so you can see on the Ordnance Survey map the kind of shape of it, and it's just to the left hand side on the road map there. So it's a bit of an odd shaped, but that is Walkmill Community Woods. It used to be a colliery many years ago, so from 1876 to 1960 there was extracting coal in the area, and then it turned into a recreational site in the 1990s, and it's owned by Cumbria County Council. So they did lots of tree planting on the land in 1996-97. So much of the site is now woodland. But Cumbria County Council put up for sale in 2019, and there was a community outcry because it's a very much loved public space. And the parish council and the community got in touch with us and asked if we could help them out. So we helped them put in a business plan and a business case for a community asset transfer, which I'm pleased to say was signed. A lease was signed this year for a 99-year lease for the parish council to have the site for the community, which was great news. So we've been doing lots and lots of work. We're looking at putting in a National Lottery Heritage Fund bid for the site. So we're in the development phase for that at the moment. So we're doing lots of surveys, finding out about what wildlife's on the site, woodland management plan, and lots of community engagement. You can see on the right hand side there we had an open day, and the chap chopping the ribbon there is the last remaining miner that lives in the village. So we asked him to come and open the site for us, which was really great, with a ribbon that was made by the local school. So looking at lots of health and well-being and the benefits of being out in nature and woodlands is very well documented, particularly since lockdown. There's been lots and lots of surveys about how good it is for everybody's mental health. So we're looking at delivering green gyms linked to social prescribing, lots of wellness walks. We've got a school project called Wellbeing in the Woods, which is to help children who are suffering with mental health issues at school. We set up a forest school site in the woods, which has been really well used by local schools, but also families, I think, are really enjoying going and sitting in the woods as well. So lots and lots of things going on while we develop the bid, which goes to the lottery very soon. So this is what the site will hopefully look like. Just a small, we might be able to see that very well, and certainly probably not be able to read the writing, but this is all the things we hope to do. Lots of wooden management, because the trees were all planted at the same time, so are now requiring some thinning. Also, I don't think the people that planted the trees mixed the bags up very well, because there's little compartments of the same species, and the beck that runs through it is in a horrible concrete liner, so we're taking that out. We're going to crush the concrete and make footpaths. We're going to build 26 new ponds. We're putting a 2-kilometre hedgerow all the way around the outside of the site. We've got 10 new wetlands, lots of sinuous bifurcating channels putting in for the beck, and also an apprenticeship scheme. So we'll get some more young people able to carry on all these conservation and woodland jobs, which will hopefully be created in the area with all the lots of great projects and things that are going on. And that's about it. Very quickly, there's only 3 minutes left for questions, so sorry about that.
No, not at all, Jodie. Thank you so much. I think it's always a challenge, isn't it, to cram so much into 1 hour, but hopefully it's given us a flavour of, challenge and opportunity, and a huge amount, particularly from your talk through there, Jodie, and from Ian as well at Hallbank Farm. Some really, really inspiring examples and case studies of what can be achieved. So yeah, I'm so sorry we haven't got as much time as we wanted for questions. Nigel, is there a chance just to take a couple of quick ones? Have you got any in the chat that you wanted to cover very quickly? Conscious people need to go, no doubt, for 3 o'clock meetings.
Yeah, Tim, we've had several questions, and Neville particularly has been very good at answering those. I don't know whether, Neville, you'd like to come back for 30 seconds on any of the points you've made there.
So I guess the question about what tree on what site, it depends. Hopeless answer. It just depends so much on individual site conditions, hence the need for individual advice linked to people's objectives. And that's why we can do it for free. Thanks,
Neville. I think that's a crucial point that's coming out about it really does depend on the context, and also this point about trying to find a sensible middle ground between some of the extreme views or approaches that may be being championed in some cases. So, Tim, I think on that basis, we'll probably need to sum up and move on, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much to all of our speakers, Neville, Adam, Ian, Emmanuel, and Jodie. I think we've covered a huge amount of ground in an hour. I think, Nigel, it's right to say that we can follow up with this. There'll be some information sent out to everyone that's participated. And indeed, if you've got further questions, I'm sure we can field those, direct those either to myself or Nigel following this session. We'll share, I think Nigel will share the recording of the session with everyone as well. So you can look back at that conversation, which I'm sure in itself will generate further questions. But Nigel, the next session in this series is in January. Have I got that right? And we'll focus on peatland.
Exactly, Tim. I put the link in the chat, and it's on the 17th of January. So everybody's welcome on that. And these events are all designed to try and identify some of these key issues, find the opportunities, challenges, solutions across very diverse agendas. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you too, Nigel, for all your hard work in setting these up and putting them together and getting us together to discuss these important issues. So I look forward to seeing, I'm sure, some of you again on that session in January. But we'll close the meeting there. And thanks again to everyone, all of our presenters. Yeah, thank you very much all.